Hello, hi everybody. I recognize a few names on there, so that's kind of fun to see some other people too. Um, it's just a real privilege to be here. I got to meet Josh this summer, and one thing we started talking about was for some reason, I have found this connection with young artists around Ontario, especially the Ottawa area. And my heart has really grown for artists in this area, not just young, I shouldn't just say young artists, many artists and connecting people. So this has been a wonderful journey over the last year. I am a creative worship arts director in Nepean. So that's what I do for a living, which is a real joy. I can't believe it's a job because I get to do creative things every single day and connect with creative people all the time. So that's what I get to do, and it's a thrill to be here. Thanks, Nadine.
Thank you so much for sharing, Karlene. Yeah, that was beautiful. Adam, what about you? What is your story?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I see a couple of names from my own church, so I feel properly exposed. Hi, guys. Like Karlene, I also got to know Josh just about, I think, maybe 2 months ago. And I stopped by Josh's studio and just had a wonderful chat with him, talking about arts, both inside and outside the church. And like Karlene, I also work as a worship director. And Karlene and I both were here for the last event that you guys hosted. And I feel very privileged to be one of the panelists this time. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Adam. It is a great privilege to have you guys tonight and discuss artistic communities. In the meantime, if I can have everyone just write their name and wherever they're zooming from in the chat, that would be grateful because it would help us get to know each other and follow along the discussion. And for now, I would also like to introduce Josh, and he can also introduce our topic for tonight.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name's Josh, and I'm a fine artist and also a columnist for Love is Moving. And I've had the privilege of helping help organize these Zoom discussions as part of the EFC's new Creators Collective initiative. Tonight, I'm really looking forward to jumping into our discussion with my new friends, Karlene and Adam, who are both from RENEW Arts and Theology. I had heard of RENEW over the last few years and, admired their work from afar. But it just so happened, as Karlene mentioned, that they attended one of our latest Love is Moving virtual discussions. And it just so happened that we ended up to be in the same breakout room afterwards, and it was like totally unplanned. And we had just this like lovely discussion. And I realized pretty quickly, like, wow, we have a lot in common here. We just kind of have a similar vision for arts and faith and how to make sense of the two and integrate them. What I really appreciate about Love is Moving and our publisher, EFC Canada, is that we really desire to have a spirit of collaboration and not competition. We want to highlight the redemptive cultural work being done in the church across Canada. So that's why this evening we're partnering with RENEW to host this conversation. Our topic for this evening is how to create artistic community. This topic was actually suggested by some of you who filled out the survey that we sent out a couple months ago. And I also think it's a really important discussion to have, especially in light of the post-pandemic context that we're living in, where I think a lot of us realize how much we missed in-person community and felt kind of isolated and disconnected from one another. As the famous poet John Donne penned, "No man is an island." We all need community to flourish as believers. What I've noticed, though, is that artists tend to drift out of the church. And it's not necessarily because, they're having doubts in their faith or questioning the doctrine, although sometimes that's the case for artists. but simply because they fall out of fellowship. They're not really embedded in a community of believers who both love and care for them and also value their creative work. Well, hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll gain some practical insight from Karlene and Adam of how you can start your own arts group in your church, maybe receive encouragement for a community you're already involved in or initiative, or maybe just consider the spiritual practice of community as we try to establish healthy rhythms for our faith and life. Well, with that being said, how about we jump into our discussion? Karlene and Adam, thanks again so much for joining me tonight for this interview. Well, I wanted to start us off with just you sharing a bit of how RENEW began and maybe what specific needs you were initially aiming to meet.
So when I first joined RENEW about 2 years ago, I think RENEW had a different focus. When I first joined, the focus was very much about creating a space for conversations around arts and theology to happen both inside and outside the church. And just this last year, our RENEW team has gone through its own renewal. And now we have a slight shift of focus and a new team of leaders. So Karlene, would you like to say something about that? Yeah.
Sure. We spent the first few months just getting to know each other. Really, there's 4 of us on the team, plus Mark Peterkins from One Way Ministries helped to get us all together. But we realized our focus was going to be on relationships, building relationships in the arts community among Christian artists, and artists being literary artists, visual artists, musicians, drama, the whole gamut, not just trying to focus on one, even though Adam's a worship director in a church, so am I. We wanted to include all areas. So something that includes some mentoring, connecting, how do we inspire people as well as challenge? That's kind of where we're looking.
That's neat because you both are involved in worship music, but yet you have kind of a broader vision for all the artistic forms, which is just terrific. I'm curious, what are some of the events that you've done over the years that maybe you want to highlight, or initiatives that you've organized?
Okay, well, I'll start with that one if you want, Adam. This past year, our first event with RENEW was a wine and cheese event that we had in July. And the purpose was really just to figure out who in the Ottawa area is interested in something like this. And when they come, give us some feedback, what it is that you'd be looking for. Is it about a network? Is it about getting together to have discussions? Is it about having workshops or showing work? So 25 people came that day, which was wonderful. So we had 25 different, it was a surprise. We weren't really sure all week. The numbers kept floating up and down, and I wasn't sure until that day. But it was fabulous getting to meet people from all different backgrounds, all different talents and abilities. And it was obvious that people were looking for community, a place to be able to use their arts in the church as well as their faith in the community. So that was our first event. Okay. And then this past week was our first 248 Cafe. So the 248 Cafe stands for about 2 hours, about 4 questions, and about 8 people, but we really don't care about the numbers. So we figured that was perfect for artists. The idea would be we give ourselves 2 hours. There's questions that are put out on the table when you arrive, just 4 questions sitting there. And right away, we just let people know, if you're comfortable answering one of these questions, go ahead and answer it. And if you're not, just pass. Or if the question starts generating other questions, we don't have to hit any of the other questions. If that leads into a discussion all in itself, we'll go there. And if it's a dud, we won't. And so this past week, 6 of us showed up to this cafe, the Art House, downtown Ottawa. And they're going to be pop-ups all over the place, by the way, because there's
neat.
Yeah, Ottawa's so vast. So it'll be in the West End, the South End, Orleans. We'll head in different areas. This one was downtown. And I was pleasantly surprised. The discussion was great. And one thing that happened was my niece was there, who's a university student, visual arts program at the University of Ottawa.
Awesome.
And one of the ladies that came was in her 60s, and she was a visual artist who went to university, and they were talking about their experiences in university, one from 40 years ago and one from now. And they started talking about the challenges of what they were experiencing. And I'm watching this relationship form. It was really exciting. And I thought, is my niece seeing this potential like I'm seeing this potential? And on my car ride home that night, my sister-in-law called and she was, who's this lady that's my daughter's talking about? And so I said, well, I explained a little bit, and she walked in the door and said, Mom, I have a new best friend, and she's 65 years old.
That's awesome.
So to me, that was perfect. That's exactly the purpose of an event like that. So that's happening every month.
That is so cool.
And then Adam and I are working on a large event for next year, but we don't really have details yet. We're working on something like that.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. I think it's so neat, like how you're creating kind of a third space. Whereas like you have like there's the church arts thing that you could do, but then like the art gallery which is often more or less like a secular space. Sometimes deeper conversations arise, but this is kind of like a third space that you're opening up this kind of avenue to have these conversations, just questions that provoke that. I think that's really unique because like oftentimes we can kind of stick to our kind of Christian subcultures and very easy to stick within our kind of safe boundaries of the church. So that is very cool. Another question that I had was just kind of big picture. So we heard a bit about the events that you've done. The title, like Renew Arts and Theology. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about why you believe that the art should engage in theology and vice versa. Adam, do you want to speak to this?
I would love to jump on this one if you don't mind, Karlene. I can start with the stuffy part and the boring part, and then you can take the fun part.
Nice, perfect.
I think when I hear this question, the first thing that pops to my mind is, what is theology? And I often think about theology as us understanding who God is. What is this world that he has created? Who are we in light of who he is and how he has created us? And so the question is, who is theology for? Is it just for the theologian? Is it for artists? Is it for the engineers? And I often think of J.I. Packer. When he wrote Knowing God, he started with the question, who is theology for? And the answer is theology is for everyone, because we need to understand the world that we are in, that we're a part of, understand the creator who has created us. Therefore, theology really is for all to explore. And I think art has always been a topic that's hard and difficult to talk about, to define, and at times difficult for people outside the arts to relate to. And I think that's just all the more reason for us as artists to really engage both in understanding art and how it fits in the world that God has created us, which makes art such an important topic in the scope of theology.
That's wonderful. Awesome.
The only thing I would add
what would you add?
Just one thing. The bottom of my email, I have a quote from G.K. Chesterton when I sign off, and it simply says, "The more I considered Christianity, the more I found that while it had established a rule and order, the chief aim of that order was to give room for good things to run wild." And to me, that is arts and theology. So you have theology that provides the framework and the structure, but then the art side of you lets you run wild.
Okay. Yeah. That's a beautiful way of putting that. I love that. And I've heard it's been said, Matthew Milner, the art historian who's a Christian, he has often said that every artist is a theologian. And I think that that's true because, maybe not like a professional theologian with a PhD or whatever, but I think that to understand our faith on a deeper level, like I know personally in my own artistic practice, that's really like liberated, like the art that I create, knowing this kind of, I'm part of this larger meta narrative of creation, fall, redemption, and how art fits into that. Yeah, I just that's what I think really drew me to your organization, just that you brought both of those together, like the head and the heart, because I don't think they can be separated for our spiritual formation. I'm curious, like in your relationships with artists, whether that be like in your respective churches or the other communities that you're involved in, but like how you balance like discipling artists with also like helping them hone their craft. So whether it be like something like learning theology or understanding the Bible at a deeper level, but then also wanting to make sure that they're developing in artistic excellence. Oftentimes those can get kind of like imbalanced. How do you handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I almost have to draw on my experience as a non-worship director before I became a worship director,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how I experienced what was it like to be an artist in the church, to answer that question. And I think over the years, I realized it's really important to recognize that arts in the church, as glorious as it can be, is often not the full expression of the artist's calling or gifting. And I think it's important for the artists themselves to recognize that, and then for the artistic directors to recognize that as well. So that when I think about worship directing these days, and when I think about introducing new music, new style to my musician, I think less about let me teach you something, but more as in let's explore something together, and let's see if we can find a different expression of your craft, and let that be a place where you can do something different, you can do something new, but at the same time also work on the skills that you already have, right? And I think a lot of that is realizing that the gifts that artists bring into the church might not always translate one-to-one into the area that I would like them to focus on. And it's important to have that conversation with the artist and explicitly express, hey, like this is what I'm asking you to do, and this is the heart behind it. I understand that this might not be exactly what's the most fun or even aesthetically most fulfilling, but here's the heart behind it. Would you partner with me in this process?
That's awesome. Yeah. So knowing your own limitations, like you can't be, a classical conservatory or art school and provide everything for your artists, but knowing what you can do, and those kind of, having those relationships where you can be honest and open and for whatever request you have. I'm curious, like as worship directors and creative arts director, Karlene, like what are some of the challenges that arise working with artists? I know I've done a little bit of that, and it is quite challenging. It can be like herding cats and.
I think part of it goes back to that order thing. And so what both my husband's a pastor as well, and we've learned that the more we work with artists, you have to give a lot of freedom and time to an artist. I think the church, unfortunately, takes events and they come up with things late, and they're like, "Oh, I'd like you to do this," or "Could you just pull this off?" And we forget that an artist contemplates and thinks and needs space and time to create. And so we used to joke that, okay, we want to do something for Easter. Well, let's get them all the information in September. So that they can be thinking about what it is exactly you would like to do. So that would be one. Timing, like to be very aware of time. And I think, Adam, you're going to talk about slow art versus fast-paced church, which is a little bit of that. Do you want to touch on that right now?
Yeah, I think I trained. Yeah, I can give a very, very quick, brief talk about that. I trained as a classical pianist, and so when I think about music, I am thinking about spending hundreds of hours on 1 hour of music presentation. And so it for years I was just so not satisfied with the expression of my own Sunday worship and how I sounded on the piano, and even rehearsal became really challenging. How can I do something within 2 hours where I normally would have spent 20 hours on it? And I think being able to acknowledge that what art is being required and what's being asked for and asked of by the church was really important and part of my journey of understanding how do I be an artist in the church.
That's great. Yeah, because it's challenging, especially, someone you have your master's degree, I believe, in piano, and so you come with all these talents, and I imagine that there's also differences among the worship artists that you work with. Some are professionals, some are more hobbyists and amateurs. Like, how do you deal with that? Even like the potential of maybe competition, or someone feels like they've been overlooked for the solo for Easter or whatnot.
We wrote one down. We wrote as one of the challenges is the idea of collaboration versus the reality of collaboration.
Okay.
And everybody likes the idea of collaborating, and then when you throw it out there, it's not always as fun as people think it's going to be. But it's important. It's really important to learn to work as a team. Like, that is a skill. That is definitely part of the whole mentoring idea. But yes, sometimes that has to be something, to point out to people. Or another comment Adam and I have talked about is our artists are often emotionally very aware, but not always emotionally in control. They're very aware of their feelings, but sometimes they just say it. And it can set a tone all of a sudden in an environment, and you have to go, let's just hold back here a little bit and let's rephrase what I think you were trying to say. So things like that also are, but when I say challenges, those are just being aware of people's personalities and working and learning to work together, which is the body of Christ, right? Not just the artistic community, that's everywhere.
Yeah, I think Karlene, you're absolutely right. It's not just unique to the artistic community. It might be a little bit accentuated, but it's really ubiquitous everywhere. And I think one thing that Karlene and I have talked about, and we both agree, is that a lot of these issues that might arise when you're working with artists cannot be solved right on the spot. The root of the solution is relationship. If you have built a relationship with this artist, either they're a musical artist or visual artist or spoken word artist, and they trust you, they know when you ask them, you're not just taking advantage of them, and you actually care not only about their gifts, but also about their whole personhood. It's a lot easier to work with them, and it's a lot easier for them to come around you to say, I know that this is not my primary what I like, but I would like to support you. And I think one thing we have to understand that we're all created differently, and the recognition is that we're different. The relationship is what takes that difference to saying, I understand that you're different from me, to say, I actually love that you're different from me. So I think that relationship really is key to working with the artistic community, helping people understand that God has created us all to be different, with different likings, different tastes, and different personalities. And that will solve most of the problems.
Yes.
Yeah, that's terrific. And you kind of answered another question I was going to ask, which is just about like having a two-way relationship with the artists in your church, because something I've observed over the years is that sometimes pastors do this unknowingly, is that worship pastor, they are interested in the artists when they can do something for them, play on the worship team or, dance or do a painting or mural or whatnot, but then they're not as interested in what that artist is doing outside of the church, like their performance or art exhibition. And so there can be kind of like a utilitarian sort of relationship that I've observed. And just from talking with you guys, you seem to be very engaged with your artists, like in their totality, not just what they do at church, but also their lives. So yeah, any thoughts on that?
That just happened to me on Sunday, actually. I have a young musician and he's wonderful. We get along so well. He's 18 years old and I respect him because the first thing he does when he walks into a room, he looks everybody in the eye and just says, "How are you today? How are you today?" And he's just, very, very present with everybody when he's with them. And I really appreciate him. So at the end of the service, I knew I had asked him to do quite a few things. And I had to ask him and just say, when I'm asking you these things, it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because I just want to help you get better at what you're already doing. And I said, I see so much in you. I said, I just want to make sure. And he looked right at me and he goes, "I know you, Karlene." He goes, "It didn't bother me at all because I know you."
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I learned how should I say this? I think I learned in my own heart that my job is to minister to the people that God has put in front of me, not just govern the gift that God has put in my life. Right. So I need to see these people beyond what they have to offer and almost see past that. I need to see them first as people first. And then to say, "Hey, I also noticed that you have this gift. What do you think?" And it's not about me saying, "Would you consider using this gift for this purpose?" But it's more about me asking the question, "Why do you think God is giving you this gift?" And I might be a weird worship director. I'm very firm on just because you have been given a gift in music doesn't mean that you should be on the worship team. You should only be on the worship team if you truly discern that this is the primary way that God has gifted you in the church and has called you to serve, right? I'm a lot more concerned about who they are in their overall Christian walk than whether they're using their specific gift on the worship team.
Yes, that's terrific. I love that goes to a much deeper level. Making a little bit of a transition to you guys specifically. You both work in churches, but you yourself are creatives, and I'm sure sometimes feel burnt out in certain seasons. Like, how do you carve out time for your own creativity? And Adam, I wondered if you could also chat about how you're bivocational. So you're also a professional fine artist and do incredible paper art, some of which is in the background there, I see.
I feel a little bit like a fake artist when I talk to you. I'm like, I'm a professional artist.
No. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think this little corner is kind of my life outside the church. Do we really have a life outside the church? We are the church, right? So we can't technically have a life outside the church. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think that I learned that I need to be able to just block time in my schedule for my piano and for my paper art. I actually just finished this piece last night and I needed to say no to a dinner plan to say, "Hey, I actually can't make it to dinner because I need to work from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. so I can actually finish this piece so that tomorrow when I go to a conference, everything is going to be okay."
Yeah, can you show that one to us? Could you
yes
put it up to the screen?
So everything is
so neat.
Just made of paper.
All cut by hand, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how many hours did that take?
20. They take longer than you think they're going to take. And I think that's pretty true in general for arts, right? Your project tends to take just a little bit longer than you planned it.
Oh yes,
so,
I know.
Yeah, right.
Well.
So block out time and block out extra time.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
My undergrad university professor used to block out VIP in her schedule that her post on their dorm. And where we just asked her, like, what is VIP? Like, who do you meet? And she says, VIP is a very important practice. I block out those time just for myself so
Yeah.
I can learn these
Yeah.
pieces. And I think that was really formative in my journey as a growing artist, understanding, okay, my practice is my appointment with myself and with my craft, and I need to honor that. And Karlene, you and I talked a little bit about this, and it's really funny. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Well, I was laughing because Theo Vandergraaf, who's also been a part of some of these discussions, I don't know if he's here tonight.
I know Theo, yeah.
Okay, so on his Instagram, he made me laugh because I could totally relate to this. I'll be practicing at the piano and, spending a few hours working on something. And, my husband, who loves me dearly, and yes, we've been married 30 years, right? But he'll walk into the room. Hey, could you take a minute and just help me outside with something? And you're like, I'm working. I know you don't think I'm working, but I am working.
Oh,
And I saw Theo's Instagram, and he was painting a painting, and he was yelling to his mom, and he was like, Mom, I am an artist. I am working. And it's very true. It's very true. People do not see it as you actually working on something. They just think, oh, they're just, playing at the piano or doing a craft or doing whatever, yes. But I've started taking a creative days.
Okay.
So just like that, I don't call them VIP, but they're just in creative days. And it can be anything from, in the summer, I work on large gardens. So gardening, playing at my piano for a few hours, composing, arranging, or cooking, like something that's just creative. And that's very necessary. And then it's fun to share it all with someone at the end of the day. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I think that's so important. Remember in Rory Nolan's book, The Heart of the Artist. I'm not sure if either of you read it, but he was, worship director at quite a large mega church, and his church knew that they needed to give him at least 1 or 2 days every couple of weeks for him to work on his own original music, because they knew he would be a better worship director, because that just small amount of time of creativity kind of breathed new life into his ministry at the church and made him, a better worship leader. So that's so important. I know some people here on the call probably work at churches as well, and might benefit from that. Now transitioning to the people here in our call might be wondering, how do we go about ourselves? We're not, on staff at a church, but we're really passionate about the arts, and we'd like to have something like what you guys have done with Renew, and also in your respective churches. How should young adults go about starting an arts group at the church? Should they connect with their worship director, have a plan? What's your practical advice on that?
I think, Adam, you were going to start with your experience, and then I'll
Yeah, so we actually have a few people in this group tonight that was a part of the group that I started this fall, that we studied a book, Art for God's Sake, and just understanding the theology of art in God's redemptive narrative. And I found that group to be really, really life-giving. And when the book study ended, we decided, why don't we make this a small group where it's a place where we can have fellowship and mutual encouragement. And I just love that. I think a lot of times these things would form more or less naturally, and it's not really about finding the worship director. It's about finding the people who have the same passion, right? And I think Karlene and I talked a little bit about this. It can be the worship director. It can be the senior pastor. It can be someone who might not be on staff, right? It's really about finding someone else who is excited and on fire about the same thing that you are, and do it together. Kind of like this, right?
Yeah. Just find people who are already interested in the same things you are. And I like the idea of starting as kind of like a book club to begin and then seeing it where it goes. What do you think, Karlene?
Yeah, I was saying the exact same thing. You do, if you have a plan, because some people I have find that pastors or pastoral staff don't always take them seriously, and that can be discouraging. Or we've had someone give us the example that they are a visual artist, and the staff finds out they're a visual artist and says something like, "Hey, could you design our website? Or could you make a poster?" And it's really not connecting with what the artist actually does. And sometimes that can be belittling to someone, and it's not intended to be that way. So if you're going to create a specific group within a church, I would suggest you actually write. It used to be called mission statements. I don't think it has to be called that anymore, but a purpose for why you're getting together. In other words, there's a reason that we're doing this, and put it into your, I don't know if your church has their group meeting or gathering, whatever they have in their year, but actually say what you're doing and the purpose of why you get together, and what you would like to see. It's also great because it gives you a vision too. What would you like this group to accomplish? And it helps to give that plan. Because artists often have lots of ideas, vision, tons and tons of ideas, and follow through can be difficult. So if you have something written out, this is what we're trying to do, and then check in every so often. How are we doing with that? And you don't have to stick exactly to it. We've been really clear about that tonight. You need to be able to have flow and creativity, but it does give you a bit of a framework to work within for what it is, what your purpose is, and what you'd like to do.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've been a part of many churches, not as someone on staff, but as just a regular congregant. And I think I've experienced different churches having different amount of flexibility when it comes to starting something new. I've been part of small churches that are just all about starting something new. Oh, you have an idea? Let's do it. And I've also been a part of a church where if I want to start a group, I will probably have to talk to the senior leadership or their small group pastor or their adult discipleship pastor and say, hey, this is what I want. And does this fit into the vision and the expression of that vision in this particular church? So I think one thing that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about starting new things, especially not as someone on staff, is to understand the context of the local church that we're a part of. And does something that we want fit in the expression of this church as a whole, right? And so it's more of the idea of, let me not start my own ministry, but let me find where God is already working and join him there.
And I think, Adam, you had mentioned that it was a little bit of a tough road for you as a classical musician in a church setting, whereas my experience was very different. Working with my husband, like I said, for 30 years, he is always, you have an idea, go for it. Like, let's do it. Let's just, so I didn't have that same experience. So last year, for example, our church, for our first week of Advent, we had an outside dance group come in, a Christian dance group, and they did Handel's Messiah dance for our first service. There was no preaching. There was no other structure to the service. They did the entire service dance. And I did have a couple of people come up to me and say, did you get any comments? Was that okay? I'm like, yeah, everybody loved it. And they said, okay, good. So did I. I just want to make sure that it went over well. I'm like, it was great. But, and for Advent last year, when I got to know Adam, we were doing the 7 last phrases of Christ on the cross with the 7 I ams that Christ, who he said he was. So I contacted Adam, and I see Brenda's on here too. I contacted Brenda and just asked them, as artists, would you choose one of these weeks ahead of time, which one resonates with you, and then use your art to express them. And we did a recording, and then each week there was a devotional that people could check in with from the church. So they got to hear Adam play his piece and talk about his piece, which was a lament, and why he picked that piece in relationship to that verse. And then another one was about visual arts, and we had dance and all different relations. But people, I'm finding, are quite open to new ideas and expression. I haven't had a closed any doors closed for me. Adam, I'm not sure though, your experience?
Yeah, I think I might have experienced a little bit more on the other side. And by the way, I just love the Renew team that we have, because all four of us come from very different backgrounds and we different denomination. And when we share, it's like, wow, can't relate to that, but I can relate to this. And it's just amazing. I love it. And I think I've experienced more of the side of the church saying, I am not interested in your vision until you're interested in mine. Right. And I think as a young artist at the time, it felt very difficult and hurtful almost.
Yeah.
And now that having been on church staff at a particular local church, that I think I see more the dilemma that a big church has in terms of we only have so many people and so much facility and so much time. How do we divide these things up, and how do we allocate our time? And so that when the church has a brand and when the church has a particular expression of how things are done, often when it's systemized, these ideas that are slightly on the peripheral may or may not fit very well, right? And so it does create a challenge for the artist to say, hey, how can I craft something? And I think part of our job is to problem solve as artists, right? How can we craft something and create an initiative that both serve this church and it really feeds us too, right? And I think a lot of time it's about being strategic and being able to be flexible and being able to humbly come to the church leadership to say, hey, I actually want to submit myself under your authority. And I want to see your vision. And this is how my vision is a part of that. Would you help me?
Yes. Yeah. So very humble posture and understanding the context of your church and, what they already have set up, because you don't want to, approach it and be very demanding or create an extra burden on the senior pastor or even the worship pastor, because they have a lot already on their plate. But I like your approach of being a problem solver as creatives. Like that should be something that we can approach with our various different kind of churches that we're at. While we could,
I would just say one last thing, that don't be afraid though to come with an idea and a vision for something. So yes, I agree that you're coming in with humility, but often if you have a lead pastor, associate pastor, and they're not artistically inclined, they won't really have any idea of what you're talking about. So if you can provide, the idea of saying, hey, can I give you an example? This is what I'm thinking. You might be surprised that when they see your vision for something, might go, oh, I've never thought of it that way before. That may work, or if we present Jesus to people in this way, I had never even considered it. So not necessarily that they would be closed-minded, but maybe it's never ever crossed their mind to consider it that way.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid. Be courageous and try different things and be flexible.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for those thoughts. That's just, really practical advice. And I know myself being involved in church arts ministries, oftentimes like a pastor doesn't think like, hey, we could hang art in the cafe. The walls are blank, and it could be, a place for new attendees to check out the art and get some spiritual enrichment through it, and also just create the space to be more inviting, which then helps for the mission of the church. And so create discussion, exactly. So before we transition to our breakouts, just wanted to lastly give you a chance to share where people can learn more about Renew and also get connected with you guys. You're in the Ottawa area, Karlene, and you're in Mississauga, Adam. Feel free, whatever. We have your link, so they might want to check out your website.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our website link is shared towards the beginning of the chat. And so that's definitely one place to to hear more about us. And you can also send us an email, subscribe to our mailing list. And if you live in Ottawa or around the Toronto area, we would love to meet you in person.
Awesome. Great. Thank you again, Adam and Karlene. Let's see if we could all give a jazz hands, clapping hands. Thank you. Now before we go to breakout, I wondered if we could all just get a group photo. If that's okay. If those of you want to turn off your cameras, that's totally fine. But let me get a screenshot here. Okay, 3, 2, 1, please. Great.
Wow, thank you so much, Josh,
Great.
and Adam, as well as Karlene. That was wonderful. What a great discussion. I feel like I now have an idea of how I'm going to start my cooking club at my church, since I'm not very gifted in arts. So now we're just going to move to breakout groups. And in the breakout groups, I would like that Ilana divides us into small groups, and then have everyone in different groups. And so part of the small group, we're going to do an icebreaker. And for the icebreaker, the question is, suppose you're about to travel across the Atlantic and it's an 8-hour plus flight. So I was wondering, who is the person you would want to sit next to in those long hours, and why? You can be as creative as you want. You can be like, oh, Jesus, or whoever it is, or the president, or anyone. So be as creative as you want. And we're going to drop the discussion questions into the chat as well. So those will be discussed in the breakout groups. And then after the breakout groups, we're going to come back. And each group is going to choose one person who's going to just share to the whole group what they discussed about and keep the conversation going. So Ilana, if you could, just break everyone into small groups, that would be wonderful. It is so great to see you all back in the main session. I hope you enjoyed the breakout rooms and that you got to, just get to know each other. So we're just going to take turns by breakout groups. So if anyone from group 1 wants to share what they were discussing about, you can go ahead.
Are we group 1? Who is group 1?
Yeah, I think that was us.
Oh, whoever wants to share, go ahead.
Go ahead, Adam.
I think we went around and shared a little bit about the local community that we are a part of. I'm group 1, right? I'm not speaking out of turn, am I? Okay, I'm group 1. We spent some time chatting about the local community that we've been a part of, and the things that we observed that was really successful. And one thing that we found that was similar in George, right? Yeah, George's story and my own church context is that we're doing this group that we meet either once every couple of weeks or once every month, and we will go around and have each one of us lead a devotional or a Bible passage, or just a way that God is speaking to you in your life in your own gifts. And that has just been a really great way to get people excited about what they're doing and what others are doing and how they're experiencing God in their gift and their calling. And we also have Angela and Leora. Am I right? Yes. And they shared their experience at a Christian private school in Ottawa, and how there's such collegiality on the staff team, that even though people are gifted differently and they have different likings, and somehow that they're able to appreciate each other's gifting and the expression of their gifts, and they're able to collaborate together. And that has just been really, really cool to hear about. And we ended our time asking that, have we found the same expression of people collaborating together and appreciating each other's gifts in the local church context? And we didn't get to conclude on that question, but I do think it was really interesting for us to say that, oh, here we're observing something really beautiful and really lovely happening in a professional setting, in a Christian setting. And here's the lack of the very same thing in the local church that we are a part of. And why is that? So we ended on the question. We didn't conclude, but it's definitely something to think about.
Wow, yeah, that is really great. Thank you for sharing, Adam. Does anyone from group 2 want to share something that they were discussing? Josh, I believe you
Yeah.
were in group 2.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't take notice of our number. But yeah, we had a interesting discussion. We had Kesha from New York joining us, and enjoyed what she shared with us about our business and a conference that she was involved in as part of her church, Selah, and for arts and entrepreneurship and business. And we had others share about like being at Redeemer Abbey is there, and Carol, who has stayed in touch with her art school friends. It was neat to hear about Joanne. She mentioned getting connected with Matt Tommy and the Thriving Artist Network. And she went to a conference and connected with many artists there in, I believe it was North Carolina. And she is now starting her own arts group at her church, and is going to be has a conversation discussion night that she shared with us about. We also talked about how some of us, like Jivan, has said that he's never been part of an arts group like this, like meeting other artists at all. So this was a totally new experience for him. And he told us about how a pastor who knew that he had artistic skill and had done puppetry work, asked him if he could assist with the Sunday school lessons, and the kids loved his performance. And it was just such a cool example of how a pastor brought out the creativity that was within Jivan. And I think that's so beautiful to see that relationship when pastors see the gifts within the people in their congregation, and can kind of draw them out to the glory of God. So those are some of the highlights that were in our group.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Josh. That was amazing. Yeah, so also this is the time, if you have any questions for our panel, please feel free. You can write it in the chat, or you can just raise your hand, and then, yeah, feel free to ask our panel. Does anyone from group 3 or 4 or 5 want to share what they were discussing in their groups?
I'll just go quickly. Karlene actually got booted with about 7 minutes. We were gonna get to her, but ours was just a small group of 3, and we were just myself, Darren, who's a friend of mine. He's an illustrator. We were just talking how, like, as a musician and an illustrator, like sometimes our forms and our styles of art don't necessarily fit in the church, but if we can kind of find communities, even like I said, like tonight, and just artists that are, the church, capital C, like this, it just really gives us kind of that motivation and pick me up for, keeping going with our own art. And I think, both Darren and I kind of related in that way in our chat. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. One thing that I would also like to mention is that in my group, we were discussing how actually social media has been helping some of us to connect with people from communities. And that is actually something that even some of our social media followers on Instagram mentioned when we asked them how they connect with other artists to strengthen their crafts. So they mentioned that they're currently connecting with other artists globally through social media apps such as TikToks. And so, yeah, this can be like another way that we can create artistic communities using social media apps. If there are no more other questions for our panel, or if anyone still wants to share, feel free, go ahead. If not, I believe we can move to closing our discussion for tonight. And I would like to invite Josh in prayer.
Great. Well, firstly, I just want to give a big thanks to Nadine for hosting this evening, and also to Lana just for making things run smoothly with all the tech. I'm super grateful for that, as definitely not being a techie person myself. Also, of course, want to thank Adam and Karlene for their generosity, for sharing with us. Any of you are welcome to reach out to them if you have any personal questions that you didn't get a chance to ask tonight, and their contact is on their website. And also just want to thank the rest of the RENEW team that came out tonight, and I just wish them all the best. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for all the people that you have brought, that you have connected us from various locations across North America to learn from one another, to be inspired by what RENEW is doing. And we thank you, Lord, that you're a relational God, and being made in your image, we also have the need to be in community, and this is how we thrive and flourish, and how we grow closer to you. And I just think of the Apostle Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 12 of how we're one body in Christ, and we're made up of many parts. And as artists and people who appreciate the arts, we know that we play a key role in the church, but we're not the only kinds of people that make up the church. There's also others that might not, understand the arts, and so that humbles us. When we go to church, we know that we don't just go to a place to meet people just like us. We are there with people that intergenerational, people who come from various backgrounds, but we know that we all play a unique part. And so I pray that the artists here would know that you've gifted them, and that whatever it is that you're calling them to do, the next steps, whether that be starting an arts group at the church, whether that be connecting more with the arts community, the broader arts community in the town or city that they live in. I pray that we would be the salt and light earth, as Jesus, you have called us to be as artists, and also bridge builders through the creative talents that you've given us. Want to just pray a blessing over RENEW Arts and Theology going forward for the future events that they are planning, that you would have favor on them for their faithfulness. I pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be in touch with all of you for our next Zoom discussion. Make sure you sign up to the Love is Moving newsletter if you'd like to keep in the loop. Hope you all have a great week. Take care.